Hey YouTube, in today's video we're going to cover a basic three-step workflow that you can use in Adobe Lightroom to make your pictures look the absolute best, whether you're uploading them to the web or printing them or whatever. You'll want to see this one, so stick around.
Hey guys, good afternoon. This is Steve with Passport to Photography, and I'm going to present a video for you today on my post-process workflow. This is going to be the basic steps that I follow from initially taking a photograph straight from the memory card and going through an editing workflow. And if I end up using it for HDR work or anything like that later, that won't be part of this video, but I'll be showing you everything that I do up to that point. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay guys, we're back, and this is an image that I took just a couple of weeks ago when I was down in Washington, D.C. This is the Smithsonian Castle, it's called, and it's a pretty neat place down in Washington, D.C. At the National Mall. So if you ever get an opportunity to go down there, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of neat things to do and places to see, so it's pretty nice. So all right, let's go ahead and move this over into the develop module. And first thing I just want to say right off the bat is you always want to, before we start the workflow, always shoot in RAW format. Set your camera to it. Most of the cameras nowadays have the option to shoot in RAW. And it's the best thing for you to do. You're just doing yourself a big favor. What that means is your camera will save the image in a format where it is retaining all of the original data that made up the image. So if you shoot in, let's say, JPEG format, JPEG compresses your image. So what that means is it gets rid of a lot of the data that comprises your image to make basically a secondary type image that has a much smaller footprint, but it doesn't contain anywhere near as much data as what your original image did. This can have a pretty negative effect not only on your editing and the quality of your edits, but also on the overall appearance and resolution of your image. Usually is not nearly as nice. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. And so first thing off the bat is we want to check our white balance. And the white balance on this looks pretty good. I believe it was set to automatic when I shot it. But it's still something that I usually check just to kind of take a look at. And white balance is one of those things that when you, if you don't know what white balance is, when you take a look at a picture, sometimes the coloring is just off. Like if it was that, you would immediately go, gosh, what's wrong with my picture? What's the deal with that? And it's way too warm or way too yellow. So we can correct that by either putting that slider back, or we're just going to pretend that we didn't move the slider. This is how it looked straight out of camera. So what we do is take something that we know was white at the time we took the picture, and we use this eyedropper over here, the white balance selector tool, and we take that and we put it on something that we know was white at the time. And voila, it changes it back, and there's a proper white balance. Greens look green, yellows look yellow, blues look blue, and so forth. So that's really what you want. And usually if the white balance is off, it's not usually off by all that much, unless your camera was not in automatic mode. If it was in, say, some other mode that you had it set appropriate for when it was maybe winter timeout, or it was really overcast, what have you, and you took that setting into a really bright sunny day and your camera was still thinking it was overcast. So that's sometimes when you end up getting a white balance that's just completely wrong. Like that needs to be corrected. But white balance is just a real basic correction. It's something that I always at least check just to sort of see. The next two that I do are very, very easy, very, very simple. First one here is remove chromatic aberrations. There's a little bit in this image, but there's not that much, and I'll show you where it's at. Chromatic aberrations, again, for those that don't know, happens to be it's like a fringing effect along the edges of things. So usually in high contrast areas of the image, like here, where something really light colored is meeting something dark colored, namely the shadowing here and this grass, you'll get a fringing effect right along the edge, and you can kind of see it right here. It'll be real noticeable when I click this checkbox, and it will get rid of it. There you go. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more to see if I can catch that a little bit more. Let me uncheck. There it is. And then with it corrected. There you go. Now, some would argue, we're zoomed in 800% here. There's not, if you can't see it here, then what's the point in correcting it? And it's a valid point. The issue, however, is this image is unique in terms of that it really didn't have much in the way of chromatic aberrations, but other images do. And when they have it and it's really noticeable, it really detracts from your image. So you want to make sure that you correct that. And clicking that box there will enable that to happen. The next one is enable profile corrections. What this does is just takes into account what lens you shot this with. And Adobe has a set of predefined profiles that it applies depending upon what camera you used and what lens, and it just applies a profile to fix or to make the corrections for that particular camera and lens combination that you used. So that's good. So aside from that, we will move on to sharpening. Sharpening is something that not everybody does, but when you do it, it's good to know how to do it correctly. And that's going to be up here in the detail panel. And what I do is I'm going to start over here with the radius. And on my keyboard, I'm going to hold down the Alt button, or its option on a Mac, and hold that down and then grab that slider, and we see that it's converted this now to a kind of like a gray image, and we can see the edges of everything start to come out and become more pronounced the more we move the radius slider over to the right. And so what I'm going to do is, you kind of want it where all the edges that you can see are edges that are going to be sharpened, and you don't want to over sharpen anything. So again, it's to taste here, but I kind of like something right about in the middle here. So I'm going to leave it there. Detail, again, going to be the Option or Alt button. Option or Alt. And move our slider around here again till we can kind of see some of the detail that we want to see. I think it's pretty good right there. I'm going to leave it there. Now, masking is going to be controlling the area of the image that we want to sharpen, because typically rule of thumb is like sky, you don't sharpen sky. You don't sharpen clouds. You sharpen things with structure, like these leaves, these windows, this block that the castle is made of, the flowers. All of that is certainly up for sharpening if you care to do so. But sky, you just don't do sky. It doesn't add anything to the image itself except some unnecessary noise, because generally noise is a little bit of a side effect of sharpening. Also with water, you don't sharpen water either, for the same reason. So over here on the masking slider, again, Alt or Option key, and the areas in black are not going to be sharpened. The areas in white will. So you just slide this till it starts to become something that you like. So I like the, if I'm ignoring the sky, I would probably want it about here or here. But we're including some sky in that, and I really don't want to do that. So I'm going to pull it down a little bit more, and I'm going to leave it at that, because I can see that edge of that cloud on the left is going to get sharpened. I really don't want to do that, but anyway, so that's that. So all our settings here are done: radius, detail, and masking. So let's zoom in so I can show you a little before and after. This is basically the main sharpening button right here, main slider. So you can see it's pretty pronounced. If I go all the way over, it's a lot of sharpening, way too much. That is no sharpening. So that looks okay, something like that, but why don't we zoom out and see what we think. I think that looks okay. We can do before and after. Yeah, not going to notice a whole lot being so zoomed out, but as you zoom in a little bit more, that's a little bit too much. It's a little bit more noticeable. Yeah, so it's just very, very slight, but I think that's good. It's not something that you should do so much that somebody can look at the image and go, "Oh man, really, really sharpened that." You know, you don't want people thinking that. You should be wanting to move it in a direction that it looks very natural and so forth, unless you're trying to do something just way abstract or something like that. So okay, so moving on to noise reduction. And again, this was shot at ISO 250. So the rule of thumb is the lower your ISO setting, typically the lesser amount of noise that you're going to have in an image. Not always true, but generally it is. It's kind of an unspoken kind of a rule. And so I know, however, we can find some noise. So noise is just that kind of graininess that you can sort of see a little bit here if you look real closely. There's just a little bit of grain throughout here. And the main slider to control that is right here. So if you hold, again, Alt on a PC, Option on a Mac, and it should, yeah, it turns it gray, and then we can kind of see there's some grain, and now it's about gone away completely. So right about 35, or maybe I don't have to necessarily just obliterate it because it gives it a little too smooth of a appearance. I'm going to leave it, I think, at 27. And then the detail, again, same deal. If we hold Alt or Option, we can kind of do a before and after of detail. And I notice a little bit of difference in the clouds. It's a little bit more pronounced. I'm going to leave that all the way over. I kind of like that. Contrast, again, I'm not really seeing much of a difference contrast wise. It's very, very slight, but I'm going to keep it over at 100. And I'm going to move this over here just to show you something. On the color slider, this addresses color noise, and it doesn't appear as though there's any color noise in here right now until I move this slider all the way to the left, and then you'll start to see that there actually is a little bit of color noise. You'll start to see these little, not bands, but little blotchiness of purple and teal, kind of a greenish color. And that's what this takes care of right here, and that's about it right there. I think that looks pretty good. We'll go back to detail. I don't really see any difference here in that. I'm going to leave it probably in the middle. And smoothness. Smoothness, again, a lot of times I don't do much with smoothness because I don't want to make the image itself look too sort of buttery and smooth. So I usually leave that a little bit low. Let's take a look at where we are. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty nice. I like that. I like that. I think that's a pretty nice looking image right there. So the last thing that I would check, and also just before I get off of that, always make sure that you do noise reduction after you do sharpening. If you do sharpening at all, make sure noise reduction is done after the fact, because like I mentioned earlier in the video, when you sharpen an image, one of the side effects of that is some noise. So if you do it in reverse order and you do some noise reduction first and then you do some sharpening, you will have eliminated the noise and then introduced a little bit more noise and then not done anything about it. So that's why you do it that way. And I can tell just by looking at this that although I was trying to hold the camera level, it wasn't quite level when I took it. So, and I can tell mainly by the brick sidewalk area right here. So yeah, what I'm gonna do is use the crop tool. It's the crop overlay. And I'm going to hold my mouse over here into the corner until my mouse looks like that. And then that tells me that what I can do is go ahead and move around this corner a little bit until I can level this out. And yeah, that looks pretty good to me right there. I'm going to release my mouse button and click done. Yeah, and that's going to be it. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. And you have any questions or anything like that, just leave them down below. I do check those and respond back as soon as I can. From here, just in closing, if you could go ahead and export this out and save it wherever you want to, and do whatever you want to with it after that. But that would just simply involve going up here to File and Export. And then you've got your settings here. You can just make them whatever you are comfortable with, and then go ahead and click export and save it. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.